All right, so as a kid, there was no horror villain that scared me more than Pennywise in the 90s. And now we've got a new prequel series on HBO that's diving a little bit deeper into all the early terrorizing that Pennywise did to the town of Derry. So, how was the brand new pilot episode? Well, let's talk about it. Welcome to Derry. What is up, everyone? Welcome to Mad Blood. Now, first of all, let me know down in the comments down below if you've seen it. Welcome to Derry. What did you think about it? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Were you kind of in the middle? Let me know. Also, just a heads up, this will be a spoiler-free review of the pilot episode. So my first introduction to Pennywise from Stephen King's 1986 book was way too early, was from the It miniseries from 1990, which not only scared me for the rest of my life, but also gave me an immediate fear of shower drains and also storm drains ever since that miniseries came out. So yeah, the miniseries is so unsettling and scary, even to today. It's just an all-time classic, and I love the grit and grime of that. Now, this pilot episode and this series is going to be a prequel to the 2017 and 2019 movies, Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Now, those movies, for me, the newest ones, and I've said this before, it's a weird dynamic with those movies because on one hand, it's like, damn, man, like those movies, Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 are made so technically well in a lot of different ways. And of course, like so much work was put into those movies, especially with how long they are. It's like, damn, like these movies are long as hell. But for me, it's almost like a big fancy car that you buy but has just like a gutless engine inside of it. I just think with the story and the creative approach that they go with in the 2017 and 2019 movies, it's just way too gimmicky for me. I feel like the majority of the movie is just so digital, so CGI. It feels like 75% of the movie was made on a computer somewhere with a lot of gimmicky, quick jump scares, and I get that was a big thing in that era, and I get those movies did very, very well financially, especially the first one. But for me, 2017 and 2019, I just thought they were fine. They're just not really for me. It's not really my style. I personally really prefer the miniseries all day, every day of the week over those two movies. And with that said, Tim Curry will always be Pennywise just for me personally because he's just so great in that role and always just ingrained that character in my brain for the rest of my life. But with that said, I do think Bill Skarsgård in both the 17 and 19 movie was very solid. And I think his portrayal of the character has many, many flaws, but I still think he did a good job and made that character pretty unsettling without a doubt. So seeing him back reprising the role in this series, I think that's definitely a good thing. Also, speaking of Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, so the director of both of those movies directed this pilot episode, and at the very least is going to be directing at least the first 3 or 4 episodes in this series. So if you're a fan of the 17 and 19 movies, then you're going to see some similarities here with the style and the flavor of this show. And I definitely notice a lot of that in this pilot episode. Just a heads up there, if you're a fan of those movies, you're probably going to enjoy that there's going to be a lot of similarities between those two movies and this series. All right, now let's dig into the pilot episode for the prequel series to the 2017 and 2019 movies, which, like I mentioned, is called It, Welcome to Derry. And so early on in this episode, we're immediately shown some of the great set design that we're going to see throughout the majority of this episode. Everything looks really good. And we're also early on left with definitely some pretty big questions. And also we get some nasty moments too, some weird moments. Now, I will say with this opening hook to this prequel series, with the story that we're seeing early on here, I feel like it's pretty generic. Nothing you're going to see in this opening hook is going to be like, whoa, never seen that before. That's crazy. But with that said, I do think it is shot and it is overall pulled off pretty well. And then after this opening, we have a little time jump 4 months later in 1962, where the majority of this pilot episode is going to take place. And one thing that has to be said about this show is clearly it's going to be a period piece. So a lot of the budget is going to go into that. A lot of the work and a lot of the resources is going to go into set design and cars and clothes and all of that. And not only do I think the 60s is a pretty solid era to set a horror TV show or a horror movie just in general, but I also, the cars, of course, the clothes, all of that are pretty badass as well. But then you couple the 60s with everything going on with Pennywise and in this town of Derry and all that craziness. And then on top of that, it was also, a pretty crazy time in America too. And with that said, obviously a big part of this show, being that it's a TV series, they're going to have a lot of time to dive into a lot of different angles and not just the jump scares and the scares with Pennywise and the scares with the characters and the gore and other things like that. They're going to clearly make some of the things going on in America and throughout the world a big part of the story and a big part of like the everyday life for these characters. And of course, we're in like a normal American suburban, seems like a perfect little town, right? But people are clearly dealing with the issues of the Korean War, the Russian conflict, the nuclear stuff going on, and all of that was going on in the 1960s. It's kind of that idea of this perfect little American town with these perfect little, what they call nuclear families during this time. And then on top of that, just something terrible happening that catches all of them off guard and just flips it all completely on its head. Now, I'm a guy who really loves history, loves all the stuff about the war and post-war and pre-war and all that stuff. But I do hope in this series, as it goes along, we spend more time just focusing kind of on the kids' journey, their journey to figure out the clues and piece this all together of what's really going on, very similar to the miniseries and the other movies and things like that. And I hope we don't really dive too much into like, oh, what's going on in American families and stuff during the 1960s. I'm just not that interested. Like, what I come for this series is I want to see Pennywise, and I want Pennywise to be gritty and scary and in the shadows. Don't show too much of him. I want to see these kids have to figure all this out on their own because they can't tell the adults because the adults are not going to believe them. I really enjoy that journey, and I hope they do that journey well and they make it scary and interesting. Now, I do enjoy learning about a lot of that other stuff, and I do enjoy having some of that other stuff woven into this show, but hopefully it doesn't become too much of this show and take away from the actual journey of what us horror fans came here for, right? We didn't just come here for a history show or a history channel. We came here to see some scares and some creepy stuff, right? So hopefully they really focus on that as this goes along. And I do think in this pilot episode, they blended that pretty well. And one thing for me that I noticed right away with this pilot episode as I finish it is that it's going to be nothing like the miniseries, which is unfortunate for me because for me personally, I think the It miniseries is just like horror royalty from the 90s. I think that is an all-time classic scary show, like I already mentioned just a second ago. But obviously, the 2017 and 2019 movies clearly made a truckload of money. So there's going to be a lot of people that really enjoy this show. I think some of the older fans of Stephen King's book and some of the other things are going to be less of a fan. But I think if you're in your teens or in your 20s, there's going to be a lot of things in this show you're going to really enjoy, especially because just the approach they take to horror so far in the show is very similar to the 17 and 19 movies. So if you grew up with that kind of horror content, this is going to be very familiar to you and you're probably going to enjoy it. So yeah, I think the show will have a pretty good fan base from what I'm seeing so far. And one thing I think they did a good job of in this early pilot episode, and they showed us they're probably going to take this angle with this story, is we're not just in Derry watching, American suburbia go down and everything that goes along with that, with some scary stuff happening to them all of a sudden. We're also occasionally being pulled away to this side story that involves the Air Force. So there's this key Air Force base right outside of Derry that is one of the most important Air Force bases, I guess, on the East Coast because of its proximity to Russia. And there's some maybe potential, Area 51 type stuff going on. And also at one point, there's a little My Bloody Valentine cosplay little moment there. If you've seen the episode, you know what I'm talking about. But I do find myself interested in this side of the story. Now, obviously, this isn't a movie. This is a TV show, so some of the scares, some of the Pennywise stuff is going to be slowly brought out because not only do they have the time to do so, but they got to leave a little bit more meat on the bone for some of the episodes. They can't just leave it all in the pilot episode and then have nothing left for the other episodes in this series, right? Of course. So if you're expecting, I will say, just a ton of Pennywise early on in this pilot episode right away, because the main reason you came to this show is because you want to see Bill Skarsgård and Pennywise just going ham on people, I'll just say, be patient. That's what I'll say. But with that said, I did think the end of this episode was a pretty good hook for me. Not necessarily because the story or what we were seeing on screen was all that unique or all that interesting or all that scary. But if you've seen the episode, obviously you'll know what I'm talking about. But I'm just kind of asking myself, like, did they really take it there at the end of this episode? Are the consequences from what we think we just saw on screen actually gonna be what happens? Because if so, I mean, I was kind of predicting the story in this show to go this way, but now it seems like we're going a different direction. And yeah, I like that. All right, so to wrap things up for my review on this pilot episode, I'm sure there's some of you that want like this hot take on this pilot episode, like this is an absolute disgrace to Stephen King's name. But honestly, I can't really give you that because there's nothing really in this pilot episode that I thought was like glaringly bad, or even with that said, like mind-blowingly good either. I wouldn't necessarily say it's just in the middle as just like bland in the middle. I do think the set design is really solid. I think the way this episode looks is really, really good. I think the acting is fine. It's serviceable. And there's some interesting things that take us away from the main story, like I mentioned earlier, which I think is fun. I would say it's kind of maybe a little more into the good side than just like the middle. And yeah, very similar to what I said about the 2017 and the 2019 movies earlier and how they look. This TV show so far, I mean, it's very much a modern type of a movie that, technically, I guess you could say looks kind of perfect, like on paper, perfect. For me, though, it's way too squeaky clean. It's way too digital like the 17 and 19 movies. Very similar to that. I mean, me personally, I just prefer the pure film grain of like the 90s miniseries, just that grit of it. There's something about it. There's been some other people who have explained the difference between modern TV shows and modern movies compared to the old movies and why they look different. There's been people who have explained it way better than I can. But with that said, yeah, this show for me so far, yeah, I don't love that angle of it, how it's just so squeaky clean and so perfect. Some of the shots do feel like they're on a set. It doesn't feel all that realistic. Also, in this pilot episode, the script is not necessarily bad or anything like that, but I do want a little bit more from the script. At times, it doesn't quite feel all that authentic to how people would actually act in a situation like this. But there is enough there, especially at the end, and especially the stuff with the Air Force and all of that, that makes me want to check out episode 2. But yeah, you guys know how it is with shows. Typically, it's a little bit easier to make your premiere episode pretty good and your season finale pretty good as well. But what really makes or breaks a TV show and makes the all-time great shows what they are is the middle episodes. If you're able to not only have a premiere and a season finale, great, but also the middle episodes keep people around and don't just feel like filler episodes. That's what's going to make or break this show for me personally as well. If the middle episodes just feel like they're just filler episodes and we're kind of just moving our wheels until we can hopefully get to the finale for the season, then I'll probably end up dropping the show. So yeah, we'll see how they do with those middle episodes. But all right, everybody, those are my thoughts on the pilot episode for It, Welcome to Derry. If you want some more videos from me right now, I'll link some for you here. If you don't want to miss future videos on the channel, the best way to do that is to make sure you subscribe. Also, do me a favor, guys, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like on it. It really does help me out a lot. All of my social media links are down in the description if you want to follow me over there. My Twitch channel where I live stream sometimes, my Instagram, stuff like that. But anyways, thanks so much for watching. If you've made it this far, always great to talk horror content with you guys, especially during October. My name is Matt, and I will talk to you in the next one.